Evening, everybody. It's real pleasure to be with you. As Kerry says, my name is Matthew Capper. I'm a Naturetrek tour leader. I do this in my spare time. So my day job is with Lincolnshire Wildlife Trust. So I'm their head of public engagement and communications. I've been with Naturetrek for a few years now, and Florida is one of the tours that I do regularly. So as you can see here, we're going to be talking about the Sunshine State. This is a fantastic winter birding destination. And as Kerry said, we are literally heading out in a week's time. So this time next week, I'll be down at Heathrow, which is really, really exciting to be back. We missed last year for obvious reasons. So to be getting back to Florida is really, really exciting. So I think probably most of you know where Florida is, but here we are. We're down in the southeast of the United States. It's the southernmost point of the US. And as you can see, we've got the Gulf of Mexico on one side of us. We've got the Atlantic on the other. So it has an incredibly long coastline, Florida. And if you're in Florida, you're no more than 60 miles from the sea, wherever you are. The weather, as we say, Sunshine State. So we've got 300 days of sunshine here in Florida every year. It is the place where they invented suntan lotion. And in February, when we're out here, we're going to be talking sort of mid-20s. It's the drier time of the year, so we won't really be getting any rain, maybe the odd rainy day, the odd shower, but really it should be largely dry, which is really, really good. And if we zoom in just a little bit more, you can see the itinerary that we're doing here. This is a 10-day tour of Florida. It's a bird watching focused trip. We literally crisscross the state. As you can see, we fly into Orlando and back out from Miami, and we take in a number of the best Florida birding sites along the way, and that gives us a nice variety of habitats as well. So the wildlife changes regularly as the trip progresses. We tend to stay in sort of chain hotels, so things like Marriott's, Comfort Suites and Inns, those kind of places. So they're well appointed, nice, comfortable hotels. And what we've done is we've set an itinerary where each place that we go to, we stay for 2 nights. So rather than just turn up and then move on, it gives you a little bit of time to settle in and stay a couple of nights. And that's quite good. So although we're covering lots of ground, there's a nice balance there as well, but not moving all the time, which is good. And it's fair to say that Florida is a photographer's dream. This is a photo that I took a few years back, grey plover, with the sunset behind it on a beach in Florida. And the light levels here, as you can see, Florida is a great place if you want to take photos or get into wildlife photography, because you get really good shutter speeds with the light levels. The birds are plentiful. They're everywhere. They're tame. They tend to stand still quite a lot with the herons and egrets. So it's a really good place if you want to get into your wildlife photography. And it's a really nice mix of bird species that we get as well. So going in February, at that time of year, you've got some of the American birds that normally would migrate south. They're still in Florida at the south there. So you still get some of those summer birds that you would think of elsewhere are still around. Some of the exotics from further south, the frigate birds, things like that. So it's a really nice blend of things to give you a good introduction to American birds. And the American setup for birding is really, really good as well. So they have some really good facilities at their reserves, lots of boardwalks. The Americans love a wildlife drive. So there's lots of options to view, lots of well laid out reserves. And it just means that we can spend time either walking through the habitats or driving along some of these places and just stopping periodically whenever we see there's something good to look at. We tend to use we've switched this year to a big 12-seater minibus. So there's good height, good visibility as we're driving along. So it works really, really well as a birding tour. And this is sort of just characteristic if you're going to these wetland reserves. There are lots of herons and egrets. You might get 15 species of heron or egret and stork and things like that during a day. Lots of wildfowl like these blue-winged teal, lots of waders. There's Wilson's snipe on here. The drive we do at Sanibel Island at J Ending Darling, we get things like roseate spoonbill here, reddish egret in the middle, tricolored heron, lots and lots of stuff to see all the time, which is part of the attraction for Florida, really. And we visit a site called Merritt Island. This is one of the iconic US birding sites. Cape Canaveral, which is NASA's Space Center. When they purchased the land, what they didn't need, they turned into a big wildlife refuge. So we drive around bird watching during the day with a backdrop of rocket launch pads. And one of the species that we get here is Florida scrub jay, which is the one that you can see on the screen. And this is Florida's only endemic bird. So it's a good one to get. These are very tame. Sometimes they'll perch on people's heads. And it means that they also are very easy to photograph. And you tend to see several when you see one, because these are birds that go round in family parties. So the young birds will help the parents to raise chicks. As when they're 1-year-old birds, they'll help raise the next year's brood. So they're quite a nice species. And there's a long-term study here at Merritt Island. You can see this bird here that I photographed is color ringed. And it's not all birds. We see a good variety of other wildlife as well. Sometimes we find these out during the day. This is a 9-banded armadillo. Especially if it's been rainy, they're often, with the ground being soft, they'll go out during the day. These have got really, really poor eyesight, so they're often oblivious to the presence of people. So you often find yourself backing off from these. If they just keep coming towards you, they just don't know you're there. This one 2 years ago actually walked over somebody's foot. And another one of the really good birds that we see in Florida, when you talk to clients beforehand, they often tell you this is on they're high on their wanted list, really. And a lot of the reserves that we go to, they have bird feeding stations outside the visitor centres, and they attract this bird, which is a painted bunting. So really, if you were to give a kid a blank bird and ask them to paint it, they would literally do this. So I think it's really aptly named. Really, really stunning. The males, the females are more of an olivey green, but the males are really, really stunning. And we normally get them at 2 or 3 sites when we're on this tour. And one of our days we spend out in the countryside, south of Kissimmee. And it's kind of open countryside. There's small areas of woodland, large ranches, lots of cattle. And this sort of area, one of the real characteristic birds is the sandhill crane. And we can get flocks that can be hundreds strong going over during the day. And the bugling call of the cranes is such an evocative backdrop to this day. Call of cranes is one of my favorite bird sounds. So it's really, really nice to get those on this particular bit of the tour. And the farmland's also home to things like killdeer, American kestrel. We should get things like wild turkey. We get eastern meadowlark, which is the one here on the right, this lovely yellow breast with black dot here. Really, really nice fluty song, which you can often hear as you're birding in this area. And the one on the left here, that's a crested caracara, and this is the best area in the state that we visit to look for these. So we put a bit of time in. There's a particular road we drive down, and we just stop and scan. And these often perch up quite low by the side of the road, so we often get really close views like this one here. These are quite a stunning bird of prey. And eventually on this particular day, we arrive at a place called Joe Overstreet Landing, which is actually on Lake Kissimmee itself. And there's a boardwalk here and a little viewing area, as you can see, and it's excellent for birds. We normally stop and have a bit of a picnic lunch here. And one of the species that you can almost guarantee off the end of this boardwalk is this particular species. This is a snail kite. Now, this is an endangered bird in Florida. There's only probably about 400 pairs breeding. These are endangered really because they're very restricted to one particular type of food. So these eat apple snails. This is a snail that's probably as big or slightly bigger than your fist. And so these fly over the aquatic vegetation and basically pluck the snails off the vegetation, and then they'll take them to a perch. And they've actually evolved a curved beak, so they can actually slide the beak into the snail shell and pull out the snail from within. So they're quite a nice one to get. You can see a really nice slate grey colour and a nice white rump, which is, again, very distinctive to be able to see those and pick them out. And Joe Overstreet is one of our best spots for bald eagle as well. We see these quite regularly throughout the tour, but there's a couple of bald eagle nests at this particular location. So sometimes if they're busy nesting, we get the real privilege of being able to set the scope actually on the nest and watching the adults feeding the chicks, which is superb and something that the clients always are really, really wowed by. I mean, I think any eagle experience is really nice, but to see one actually feeding the chicks is a bit of a wow. And if we move on down to the West Palm Beach area, home to a certain Donald Trump, but also home to a couple of superb little wetlands, one called Green Cay and another one, slightly odd name, called Wakadahatchee. These have got circular boardwalks, so we spend a bit of time just wandering along the boardwalk, stopping periodically and looking. And actually, to be fair, it's been so hard to drag people away from this particular area that we've added another night to the itinerary to allow people to just enjoy this area a little bit more leisurely, which is good. And one of the things that we see here, and we see regularly, is alligator. 2 million alligators in Florida, so we get those a lot, and you can get some really, really big alligators at times. Mostly if you're on the boardwalk, we view them and watch from a safe distance. Occasionally you might get one on a path and we have to give them a little bit of a wide berth, show them a little bit of respect, but they're quite cool to see. We do like seeing alligators regularly. There's a woodstock colony at Wakadahatchee. These are the ones on the left. And again, you're walking through 3 or 4 meters away from the birds on the nest. So that's quite nice. It's also probably one of the best sites in the state for American bittern. They're a wintering bird down here in Florida. And again, they can be really close. We've nearly missed them before because they've literally been underneath the boardwalk. The one here on the right was photographed just with a phone. It was that close. You didn't, if you had a big lens, you just wouldn't have got it in the whole frame. So again, it's just illustrative of how tame the birds are in Florida, really. And over on the west of the state, we stay in a place called Fort Myers, which is close to Sanibel Island. Sanibel Island is a wonderful little barrier island with amazing sandy beaches on the Gulf Coast. One of my favorite places in the world, let alone in Florida, to be fair. My in-laws used to have a house in Fort Myers, so I used to go and stay there regularly, which is how I was introduced to Florida, really. And we do a wildlife drive on Sanibel, but we also, I always make sure that we spend a little bit of time at the end of the day just giving people a chance to wander along the beach, maybe pick up a few shells, look at a few birds, could be an osprey fishing offshore or some pelicans. Often there's dolphins just offshore here. And it's just a nice way to give people a little bit of time to relax, have a little bit of a mooch. And we always then just sit and watch the sun just sink into the Gulf of Mexico. It's one of the special things about the Florida Gulf Coast. And then we head off for the evening for somewhere to eat. So it's a nice way to end that particular day. This is another one of our target birds. This is a burrowing owl, very similar to our little owl, but these things nest in little burrows on the ground. And Cape Coral, which is near to Fort Myers, this has got the largest density of burrowing owls anywhere in the state, largely in artificial burrows. So basically they've sunk big kind of tubes into the ground and made these little artificial burrow areas. And the birds have taken to those really well. So what we tend to do is just drive around the neighborhoods. It's in residential area and just look for the artificial burrows. And then you just see, is there a bird at home sitting out in the open? No, just move on to the next. And when there is, we stop, get out, have a little bit of a look. And you can get really nice and close. As you can see here, this is a photo taken about 4 years ago, this one. Yeah, if both birds are out, you can often get really nice views and see the difference as well. The males are paler than the females because they sit outside more during the day. Females tend to sit and incubate eggs and things, so the males get bleached by the sun, so they're always paler than the females. This is where I took that photo earlier of the grey plover with the sunset. This is a place called Bunch Beach. It's a little hidden gem. Not many birders go. Quite a few people go and use the beach, so we tend to go early in the day here. But this is a really nice place to get a really good selection of wading birds. So piping plover here on the left, top left, least sandpipers here in the bottom, willet up here on the top right. But we also get Wilson's plover, snowy plover. There's normally dowitchers, least sandpiper, I've mentioned western sandpiper. There's often great northern diver offshore, red-breasted mergansers. So it's a good place to start the day, this, with a nice selection of wading birds. And this area is also good because it's got a place called the Lee County Manatee Park. Now this is where we go, unsurprisingly, to look for our manatees. We have a few sites that we hope to get them, but this is our banker site for manatee. And this is actually the water outlet from an electricity power station. So manatees are quite sensitive to water temperature. So if the water temperature goes below 68 degrees, they head off south to warmer water. But because you've got the warm water coming out of the power station here, it means that these birds, they're not birds, they're manatees. These manatees can basically hang out in the warm water coming out of the power station, head out into the Gulf to the cooler water to feed, come back and warm up again. So it means that they can spend the winter here, whereas they might not ordinarily be able to. So that means that we go there. We can expect to see good numbers. we saw over 20 2 years ago when we were there, which is really quite special. And you can see they're just fantastic, really strange animals, these. And another one of our famous reserves in Florida is Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary. This is a National Audubon Society reserve, which is their kind of RSPB equivalent. Again, this is another different habitat entirely. So huge sort of tall cypress trees with these buttress roots in this big swamp. And we just spend a morning walking along the boardwalk here. Lots to see, lots of warblers, flycatchers, woodpeckers, things like this. Red-shouldered hawk here on the left, we get quite a few there. Barred owl is quite common here. You often hear them calling, but sometimes they can just be sat out during the day like this one. Yeah, we keep an eye out for those as well. We get limpkin here, which is a really weird, nice prehistoric bird with a really wailing call. Excuse me. And then we also then head down to the south of the state to finish off in the Everglades. So you couldn't really go to Florida and not go to the Everglades. It's one of the most famous wetlands on Earth. And we birdwatch the wetlands, and we also birdwatch these little wooded areas called hammocks, which you can see here. And we look for things like this, which is a scissor-tailed flycatcher, fantastic tail streamers on this. And we also birdwatch some of the wetlands. This is the Anhinga Trail. The water here is crystal clear, so you can actually get a real view down into just the layers of life, the fish, the anhingas catching fish underwater, the turtles swimming. It's just a magical place. The wetland water here is just crystal clear. We also park carefully at the Anhinga Trail. I always park close to the visitor centre, because if you park further away, you're liable to have a little bit of vandalism. This is a black vulture, so we always make sure we're out of the way of these things. It's quite fun to watch them doing it to somebody else's car, but not when it's your own. And then we head down to Flamingo, down at the bottom of the Everglades. This is the southernmost point of the mainland US. Ospreys here are just 10 a penny. We tend to view them as, you know, really endangered special birds that have to be kept at a distance, and you can literally just walk past the nest here at the marina. And one of the things we look for here is crocodile. So this is the only place in the world where you get alligator and crocodile together. 2 million alligators, only 1,500 crocodiles, so much harder to see, but we haven't failed yet. And then our last day, we just spend it relatively relaxed in the Miami area. There's no real wetlands, so we tend to birdwatch some of the downtown areas. And the real characteristic birds of this area are actually more exotic species. So there's lots of introduced and escaped species over the years that have established. So things like common myna here on the left. There's over 70 different species of parrot. This is a mitred parakeet on the right. And so we go to various places, can be residential areas, malls, and we're looking for a whole wide range of different things. Lizard species as well. This is a red-headed agama on the left, should be in West Africa. Iguanas are everywhere. Some of them are huge, so we look for those as well. And then we tend to go to somewhere for just a bit of a relaxed lunch on the last day, somewhere like Matheson Hammock State Park here. Sit around, have a bit of a relax, and just chance to catch up again on some of the warblers and vireos, maybe things like this yellow-throated warbler on the left or yellow-rumped on the right. And we see 10, 12 maybe species of warbler during the week, so it's a nice introduction to the warblers, although Brian later will probably be wowing you with a whole wider selection, I'm sure. But we get a few down in Florida at that time of year, which is nice. And then it's time basically to drive back to the airport, back to Miami airport, and hand back the keys to the hire vehicle, and we fly back to the UK.